Hi everyone, thanks for joining us. We're just going to give people a few minutes to filter in and we'll get underway shortly. Okay, everyone, it's a few minutes past the hour, so we might just start off with a few little introductions. My name is David Brown and I'm the co-chair of the San Francisco Programming Board for StartOut. Welcome to today's session. It's great to be with you. This is the second in a series of Ask Me Anything events that we're running with our StartOut experts. Last week we did fundraising and entrepreneurship, and you can find a link to that webinar on StartOut social channels. Feel free to use the chat box on Zoom here to let us know where you are, where you're joining from. There's also a Q&A box. That's the spot to put in your questions for today's speakers as we go. We will be addressing some pre-submitted questions as well that people put in on registration, but we want it to be an interactive session, so please pop in your questions in the Q&A section. My colleague Brad from the programming board will be monitoring that section. In the chat section, you can let us know where you're joining us from and what you're excited about today. All right, so I just wanted to highlight a few things. Obviously, we're here today as part of StartOut. StartOut's a national nonprofit that seeks to increase the number and diversity of LGBTQ plus entrepreneurs across the US. And we're from the San Francisco chapter. If you're not a member, you can register at startout.org and access all of these resources that are on your screen now. The two I wanted to speak about today were the StartOut experts, of which our speakers are part of, so Jason and Michael, which we'll get to shortly. When you're a member of StartOut, you can access those experts for one-on-one discussions and mentoring about your business needs. The other one I meant to mention is the forum, which is an online community of StartOut members, where you can also ask general questions to the community, submit to discussions, post jobs, reply to jobs, all that sort of stuff. So if you're not already a member, please do join and check out those resources. Of course, we can't do any of this without our national sponsors. So it's always nice to recognize them and give them a shout out. Without their support, StartOut couldn't provide all the resources that it does. Today's panelists are Jason Kelley and Michael Volpat. Jason began his marketing career at Microsoft in the 90s and has worked for many startups over the years. He reached the highest levels of both national agency and publishers and started his own firm, Udom, in 2006. His experience with brands runs the gamut from traditional brick and mortar to digital and beyond. Jason has been a funder and supporter of StartOut for a number of years. So welcome, Jason. It's great to have you with us this evening.
Thanks.
Michael is the co-founder of Lark and Volpat Communications, a publicity capital firm focused on helping startup founders craft their stories and communicate their messages to target customers. Over the past 20 years, Michael and his partner have worked with hundreds of startups across multiple industries. Michael is always on the lookout for unique and interesting startup founders that are disrupting the traditional. He also loves his work as a startup mentor and expert. So welcome, Michael. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you.
Also joining me today are Brad and Seth from the Programming Board. Brad will be monitoring the Q&A. So again, if you have Q&A, if you have questions to submit to the speakers as we go, please pop them in the Q&A box and Brad will monitor that. Seth is monitoring the chat box, which is where you can post comments and resources as we go if you have anything to contribute to the audience. You can also select who you send it to panelists and to attendees. So if you want everyone to see it, just make sure that you select all attendees as well. All right, just before we move on, I just wanted to send out a save the date for the next San Francisco StartOut Chapter event, which is happening on May 27 at 6:30 p.m. And it's a Wednesday wind down, which is just a social gathering on Zoom again, but not in this webinar format, in more of a meeting format, where you can actually see everyone and talk to everyone. So smaller groups and a more casual networking discussion on that. All right, so I'm just going to switch my screen, because before we start, we are going to run a few surveys just to see who is on the webinar today. So I'm going to share a Slido screen. If you could all head to slido.com, either on a mobile device or on your browser, slido.com, and enter the hashtag StartOut, you will get brought into the poll section. And the first poll we are doing today is your business pre-revenue or revenue generating, or are you just here for the community? So again, that's slido.com on a mobile device or browser, and enter the hashtag StartOut to join the polls. I'll just give this one a minute for people to complete. Seeing a pretty even mix at the moment of early businesses and revenue generating businesses. All right, so pretty even split there, so that's good. We'll move to the next question in about 10 or 15 seconds, just let final people fill that one out. All right, thanks everyone for that. Next poll is your business B2B? B2C, that second one should say, oh, sorry, that's a typo. So you're gonna, oh, that was a mistake. Sorry, everyone. Typo there, but maybe if you're B2C, don't answer, and then we'll get a question. We'll put in the B2B to C, and that'll give us an indication. But probably mostly B2B there would be the more common one. All right, so we'll skip ahead with that one. And when it comes to marketing, what are your biggest challenges? Do you struggle getting people to convert to paying customers? Do you find it hard to hire the right people? You don't have money, and you can answer as many of these as you like. You don't have money to spend on marketing, or something else. All right, so not surprising, seeing as we have a lot of early stage businesses that money is an issue and resources is an issue, and also converting customers to paying customers, a bit of a pain point. Obviously, pre-revenue businesses still working on their product, so that's good, and then hiring and something else coming in last. Okay, right, awesome. That's good. That gives us a good indication of the types of people on the line. So thank you very much for that. All right, I can stop sharing now and we can start with the main part of today's session. So once again, thank you very much for Michael and Jason for joining us. So Jensen, for the first question, just wanted to ask, what is the difference between marketing and PR? Always been one that I struggle to express. So who wants to, is there a difference? Who wants to kick off? Jason.
Hey, Jake. So that is a question that's been asked forever. I'm going to give the non-committal response, which is there's actually not so much a difference in my mind any longer. It's basically where are you at in terms of connecting with your consumer base? Now, there is some reasons that PR and on the advertising side really flex differently in probably their purest forms. But when it comes to engaging with consumers, it's really wherever you're at in that funnel, either shaping perception, engaging with, or moving people down to the end part of the funnel to conversion. PR and marketing or advertising actually can flex throughout that entire conversion, but there are specialties for both. And that's how I usually see it. I don't see them as an either or, they really are very complementary.
Michael, anything to add from your end on that?
Yeah, I mean, we'll go with your purest form, Jason, and I really like that. But in its purest form, PR is earned media and advertising is paid media. I
Yes.
look at marketing as being the umbrella, and advertising and PR fall under that umbrella. So marketing's kind of like the holy grail, and then now there's all these other different mediums that fall under that.
Right.
Advertising, PR, now there's social and digital, so many different platforms. And as Jason said, where are you in the life cycle of connecting and engaging with your customer? And, you know, there are areas where PR really falls into that piece and some areas where it doesn't necessarily fall into that piece.
Sure.
So that's how I look at it.
Awesome, thanks. Yeah, that makes sense to me. So just a reminder as we go along, folks listening, please pop in any questions to the Q&A section on Zoom as we go, and Brad will pick those up. So focusing now for a few minutes on the situation we all find ourselves in now with COVID and the changing way, businesses are doing business, people are working, people are consuming. How have your clients or the companies you're working with and mentoring, how have their needs changed in recent times in light of COVID-19, especially obviously, in marketing and the like, because marketing spend has shown up as one of the biggest things impacted by startups at the moment. So what are you seeing on the streets?
Well, for me, both in the companies I mentor and work with and invest and all that good stuff, my CPG folks are doubling, tripling down right now. They're actually doing well. What has been clear during all of this is that it's shining a real spotlight on those companies that have a poor e-retail business, who haven't really paid attention to what that is. And not only for getting people to buy, but also the CRM or post-sale communication. So they're right now really tightening their work around that piece because it's really going to be critical, not only now, but I think I feel like we're going to see some shifts in terms of people's just general purchase behavior post the pandemic. So for my CPG clients, it's there's actually been a bit of a shift for their business. For the tech folks and for the startups, tech is having a lot of challenges. For my startups, I tell them that this is the most amazing time to actually start a business. I think it's freaking awesome because this is an opportunity to shape who and what you are all about in this really uniquely focused time period. So, and I don't want to take up all the time, but I go on forever. I think this is awesome time for a startup.
Perfect. How about you, Michael?
Yeah, we have a whole group of interesting clients, and we actually have a client in the biotechnology space that focuses on cancer therapeutics and diagnostics. And the CEO of that company worked on the SARS vaccine, interestingly enough. So they're pivoting, partnering with a company in Germany. And now the outreach that we're doing for them to get earned media is we're refocusing our efforts in another space. They're working on drug development for COVID-19. So rethinking messaging, I think, is a really important time right now. We work with another, I actually, in the interest of full disclosure, I'm the owner of a market up in Guerneville called the Big Bottom Market. And, when all of this happened, we decided to close, but we wanted to find a way to engage with our customer. So I started doing online cooking shows every day. So I'm kind of like, I'm my client, really in my own way. But the point that I'm making is that we had to find something to tie back to COVID-19 without bringing the negativity of the situation into the picture. And I think that a lot of clients are trying to find unique and creative ways to engage with their customers that tie back to the themes that are just flying through the world right now. One of those being COVID-19, but there are so many other ways to, I think at this time, maybe tie into the theme around the coronavirus if you have a product that does that, or if you have a product that kind of complements something that focuses on it, whether it be leisure time and finding ways to fill your time during the day or anything along those lines, my advice to startups and to small businesses and to advertisers in general is to really think about tying themselves to the theme of the day. And so that's the theme of the day right now. And that is obviously changing on a regular basis.
Yeah, great. And sort of on that point, so if you do have a business or an idea, that is a COVID success, how do you go about cutting through the noise at the moment when everyone is dealing with such dramatic circumstances? If you have a health product or a product to help a city, help businesses recover, how do you actually get through and get your message across at the moment when there's so much collateral out there to consume at the moment for people? We'll start with you, Michael.
So I think the really important thing is to make sure that your messaging is hyper focused. I have a process I take clients through. I call it the 4 Ds: different, defensible, disruptive, and direct. So you really need to understand what makes you different from the competition. And in order to do that, you have to research what their messaging is all about. You have to identify what makes you different, and then you have to be able to identify how you defend that differentiation and what in the world you're doing that is potentially disruptive. And you have to say all of those things in a very direct way. So understanding your differentiation, being able to defend that differentiation, potentially identifying your disruption, and really communicating that in a way that is free of buzzwords and is easy for people to understand is, I think, one of the important things to do from a PR messaging standpoint right now.
Yeah, perfect. Anything to add, Jason?
Well, is part of your question about just tactfully, or tactics, how do you get your message out there while people are sort of a little different right now?
Yeah, I think
a little different.
Yeah, I think the question, is around, it's hard enough to get messages to the right people in the best of times.
Yeah.
So if you're engaging with, especially if you have a COVID product where you're dealing with hospitals or cities that are super busy at the moment and don't really have time.
No.
How can you cut through some of that?
Yeah. I think it dovetails a little bit what Dave just said is, people choose products just in general, COVID or not, out of an optimistic spirit, not out of fear. So even it's easy to say we prevent or we help or all these other things. Those aren't reasons why people are going to choose you after all of this. So I would really think about what actually happens post this, considering that one of the fundamentals of marketing is that frequency, share of voice, mind state, mind share are absolutely critical. It is going to take time for you to develop, because most people that I'm imagining are with us today don't have unlimited marketing funds. So it's going to take time, because you need to get enough share of voice of the right people who are in the right mindset to understand what you're saying, so that they can then accept your message and then move down the conversion funnel. On top of that, it is great that you may have the world's greatest product to help somebody. So what? And that is one of the things that people fail at during this particular time. The so what factor is, you have this product, the product does X. What does that do for me? Not you, the person creating it, but how does that emotionally and cognitively help that person who's going to buy or use your product at the end? And people are really, that's a fundamental law of marketing that absolutely must be addressed now, because people, spider senses, and Dave was absolutely right about BS, is really high. So you can't tell somebody that I got the world's greatest mask. You have to then finish it off by saying, then you can operate your day in security and confidence, and you have to add that piece to it, because that's what people are trying to hook onto right now. That's the fundamental of all marketing, but the brands that are doing that piece are the ones that are winning right now.
Yeah, great advice. And a lot of the companies that I'm working with at the moment are really spending a lot of time on things that they generally don't have time to do, which is creating some, really good thought leadership and content marketing and blogs and, participating in the ecosystem rather than just sort of sell, talk to customers. So,
and the marketing mix right now is really different because, if you would have asked me 6 months ago, is daytime TV a great place to do, or video on demand on home? I'd be like, oh, come on. Now I'm like, are you kidding? Get in there. If you got the money, let's go, because you're going to get, huge bang for your buck. TV dollars, the cost per thousand is dropping. Digital is having its own moment again. People are understanding the importance of content on digital sites, so having your message there in the right place is important. So it feels a little bit like 2002 again when it comes to that. So there's been a massive shift in the last 8 weeks of how people are playing with media. So it's an exciting time.
Yeah, excellent. All right, so again, just a reminder, please add your questions in the Q&A box as we go. We might throw to Brad now to pick an audience question to kick off the rest of the discussion. So Brad, you got a question there for us?
Yeah, sure. Just so everybody knows, I'm not going to go in order, and we probably will go with some of the broader questions first, so they have the biggest appeal, and then we'll maybe go to more detailed ones. One of the ones that kind of jumped out, paraphrasing a little bit, is if one has a service-oriented type of a business and they're having a hard time engaging, connecting, getting the decision makers to actually want to work with you, how might you recommend perhaps overcoming some of those obstacles to get to the decision makers?
What type of business is it? Do we know?
It's a service-related business.
Can you repeat the question? I'm having a hard time hearing Brad.
Yeah, I can reread it. It says, I need to reach the board and executive decision makers for my service offering, but they are usually shielded by by an admin organization that have vested interest not to connect them, to connect the marketing to them. What ideas do you have to reach the decision makers and bust through the gatekeeper?
What I have done before is you find out you get the full name of the people that are on that board. I will admit, I go to the Google and the Bing on not a regular basis, every once in a while, put my name in to see what pops up. So do a lot of other people. So if you buy their names on Google and Bing and DuckDuckGo, when they do or even on LinkedIn, when they do a search for themselves, your brand can come up there. And it is a nice way to start that conversation because at least they get exposed to you. And I'm just bringing that up as a fun, it's very inexpensive way of at least people getting to know your brand.
Yeah, and I would actually add to that. I think that's a great approach. In addition, have a really compelling reason to go to them in the first place.
Yes.
You really have to go to them with a hard sell that is an upfront ask. And if you can attach some sort of third-party credibility, when I say third-party credibility, that's where PR comes in, where either you've written, I think we talked before about creating content, you've written a piece and it's been published in a trade publication or a magazine, or you've gotten an article written about your company. Give them something to look at that makes them say, wow, this is somebody I really need to pay attention to, and don't babble on. It's the worst thing you can do with a high-level executive or board member, or anyone for that matter. Direct, that's my 1D. Be direct and do it as quickly as possible.
And Jason, just going back to you, someone commented, it's missed the Google and Bing point. Can you just explain that again?
Yeah, I'm very sorry. Sometimes the Chicago accent, my fast speak, is a little hard on this Zoom. So everything Dave said is like the absolute right thing to do. After you do that, if you still can't get them to call, they won't call you back. You get the first and last name of the people that are on the board or who you're trying to get a hold of. You go to your Google AdWords account. You set up an ad campaign against that person's name as well as that company. But specifically, if you wanted to target me, you could literally buy Jason Kelley, Odom advertising or whatever. When I go and I search my name on Google or when I put it into LinkedIn, your company name can come up. And I've had people saying, just trying to get a hold of you, Jason, give me a call when you can. And it's pretty funny. And I've done it to people and people have done it back to me. It's an inexpensive way. That being said, you have to have the right, gotta have the right thing to say when I pick up that phone. So everything Dave was saying is absolutely right. Yeah, you still gotta have the message. But it's a fun way of getting through. And what it does tell me is that the person is thinking in an innovative, different way.
Great. And maybe another one I just saw pop in for you, Michael. Can you go over the 4 Ds again? And do you have an example of someone you've worked with that's done that really well that you could draw out?
Yeah. Oh, wow, that's on the spot. So let me explain and think. So the 4 Ds: different, defensible, disruptive, and direct. So the first D, and by the way, I wrote an article about this. You can find it on my LinkedIn page and click on the 4 Ds and you can read the article there. It really, I think it clearly explains it in a very direct way. I'll use my own term there. But the first D is different. What makes you different? And in order to really figure that out, you have to look at your direct competitors and your indirect competitors and figure out what they're saying about themselves. A lot of times my clients will go back over their messaging and compare it to competitive messaging and realize, my gosh, we're kind of saying the exact same thing. So that's really important. So that's where defensibility comes in. So how do you defend that differentiation? So you have to identify, and it could be you defend it with a patent, or you defend it by saying you're the first to market. But you have to find a way to say, this is what makes us different, and this is how we are absolutely differentiating ourselves against the competition, and how we're defending that differentiation. And then the third, the disruption. So it doesn't always play out for everybody, but disruption can work for a CPG company, or it can work for a tech company. Oftentimes it really works for a tech company, but it's how are you changing a marketplace? Think about Airbnb. Think about when Apple introduced the iPhone. These are examples of companies that have done a really good job of disruption and kind of changing the scape of things. Airbnb isn't in a lot of luck these days. Hopefully that will change and they'll disrupt again. But really look at those kind of examples. I think they make a lot of sense. And then direct is say it in the simplest way you possibly can without using a lot of buzzwords that don't mean a lot. I get to the point as quickly as possible. Let me think on the client, and people are welcome to come back to me and I can give some examples, but my brain isn't firing right now. So I can come back to that.
Sure.
Okay.
All right. So might move on with some of the pre-submitted questions. Yeah, we had a bunch of questions around some tips for, super early stage businesses that, where the creator, the founder might still be working a day job and then spending time on this at night or on the weekends. Or if you have a business up and running, but you just don't have the resources to spend on a full-blown marketing campaign, and or if you have a really small team and you're just a sole founder and you don't know, and you're restricted on resources that way. What tips do you have for businesses in those categories on what they can do to get some organic marketing strategies going and using social, whatever it might be? What would your starting out tips be for those super early stage businesses? Obviously, we've got a lot of them on the line today.
Sure. So the first thing I would do is content in this is going to be important, and shaping your point of view of what it is that you are offering or solution that you have. So I know that a blog idea has been out there for a long time, but let me just speak about it for a couple of seconds. What you're looking to do, there's a lot of non-business related reasons of why to do a blog, but the real tactical reason why you're doing it is you're trying to drive SEO traffic to your website, for example. You don't have money to do an ad campaign, but what you can do is still go to AdWords at Google or Bing, either whichever you choose, old Microsoft guy, and you can pretend that you are going to do an ad campaign. And so you can put in the type of words or do a search, so they'll give you tools to say, these are the words that people are searching most in your category. You identify the word and the phrases that are best for your business, that make the most sense. And that is your SEO guide when you write content for your website and keywords throughout your site. Because that is what people are already searching for. That is an inexpensive way and a strategic way for you to think about, okay, I'm looking at this microphone as a blue microphone, but everybody else sees it as a metal microphone. So I need to switch the way that I'm sort of talking about it. In terms of social, everybody I know wants to do a social page. I would ask, like, is that right for your business? Because not every business should really have a Instagram page. It's not for everyone, or even Facebook. Is your business really more of a Twitter, B2B? Like, what type of business are you? And be real with that. And the last thing is, when you're starting out your business, and this was a hard thing for me to think about when I started my business. I absolutely loved my business. I loved everything about it. I loved the services that I provided. Fantastic. I wish the world was full of only people like me, because it would be really easy for me to convince other people to come work for me and for me to be a client, but that's not the case. I am not my business. And that was like the hardest part for me to get around, so I could start thinking about who actually wants my business. And that piece of the pivot I had to make, and that sort of framed out how I spoke to people and the solutions I offered and the products I offered when I started out. So.
Great tips. And Michael, anything from your side?
Yeah, I mean, I want to go back to the example of that online cooking show I was doing every day, and I'm not to. This is such a relevant example, but you know, we had to close this market down, and when we did that, I said before, we wanted to find a way to engage with customers. Jason mentioned content, and content was a really important part of our strategy. How are we going to continue to bring money in while we were closed and not making any money? And so we had already had an e-commerce page set up. We used the content that I was developing on a daily basis. And then we would take that content and we would upload it across multiple social channels. And then we'd buy against those social channels, digital marketing against the social channels. It is not expensive to advertise on Facebook. You can spend $5 to $10 a day and still get a lot of clicks and engagement going on. Same thing with Instagram. Boosting posts and boosting Instagram posts is a great way to reach out to your customers that isn't super expensive. We went from selling maybe 3 orders on Etsy a month to selling 4 to 5 a day. And then as we ramped up even more, 8 to 10 orders a day. So that was a great way for us to keep our brand relevant and keep our customers engaged. I agree with Jason wholeheartedly that content is king right now. And if you can find a way to engage with your customers using content and build credibility for your brand, it's a really smart thing to do.
Perfect. All right, I just wanted to check in with Seth to see if there's anything on the discussion board you wanted to raise out. I think someone was asking for a recommendation.
Yeah, no other comments really, but yeah, someone's looking for recommendations for good B2B SaaS agencies. So if anyone has any ideas, you can pop them into the chat window there.
Yeah, so audience, feel free to pop in any crowdsourced references there. Speakers, Jason, did you have something you wanted to say to that one, or all good?
I have a couple of references I can happy to give. It'd be great to know where the person is from, what part of the U.S. or elsewhere. Okay,
great. So use the chat box for that one, audience, if you want to make recommendations, or that question came from Tom. So Tom, if you want to use the chat box, we can have a chat with you in there. All right. So moving back to some questions. How important is a company's name? And how important is it to get a good name or brand where the .com is available, or go, or if it's not available, go for like an international domain or a more obscure domain? What's in a name, and what do you have to say about that, Jason?
I think it is more important and less important than what you think. So I think .com is, there's been enough studies, at least the ones that I have seen, that .com is important, especially if you are marketing here in the US. So what I would try to think about is all the different combinations of ways that you could easily spell something or have somebody understand what it is without being too locked into something in the future. Meaning, you know, buy XYZ. If the name of your product is also the name of your company, that may work. But if it's not, you have to be a little careful. But I am a big .com fan. I think it's the way to go.
Michael, anything to add from your end?
Yeah, I agree with Jason on the .com piece. The one thing that I think is really important to keep in mind, and what I recommend my clients do, everyone wants to name their company right away. Give me a name, give me a name, give me a name. And I highly recommend doing extensive research on the competition. I've said it before, I'll say it 1,000,000 times. Doing research on the competition and clearly understanding what's being said in your space and about your space. That research should inform your name development, as should the messaging that you've developed. So starting with the name is an okay idea, but you might get into it and realize this might not be the right name for a product or service that we're offering. So extensive upfront research on the competition in the marketplace, I think, is really important before a name even comes into consideration.
Yeah, I think that's really important advice. I mean, when I've worked on projects and tried a few things myself, I like to come up with the name of the brand because it helps me visualize and actually start working on something. But you don't want to get too wedded to it, because one business I did have, I had to rebrand 1.5 years in with a lot of additional expense. The rebrand worked, so that was great. But yeah, I agree. Don't get wedded to anything you come up with until you've done a lot of research and sorted it all out. Awesome. Thanks for that. Brad, are there any other questions coming through on the chat you wanted to chime in with now?
There sure are. We have some LGBT specific questions. So we'll start with one and I'll throw up the other one after this. One is sort of broader about, do you see any benefits around messaging around being in the LGBTQ plus owned or founded company? So that's sort of a general question for the panelists, and then I'll take it to one more specific PR question after that.
Could you repeat the question, David, real quick? I did.
Yeah, sure. It's have you seen any benefit in messaging around a business being LGBTQ plus owned? So wearing it as a badge, using it as a superpower. Have you seen that work, and do you have any tips around how that might work?
Jason, do you want to jump in?
Oh, sorry.
I can jump in.
You go for it.
Okay. So yes, it works. We're an LGBTQ owned business. We've worked with other LGBTQ owned businesses. And from a PR standpoint, the type of business owner you are or the type of marketplace you're in helps to define the reporters that you're reaching out to. So, if you're a tech-based company that focuses on the SaaS marketplace and you want to be reaching out to reporters that are writing about that space. But if you're a tech-based company focused on the SaaS marketplace that is really doing unique things and you just happen to be gay, then you have this whole list of other publications and reporters that you can be reaching out to. So really, that to me is a great way to tell a story. We do it all the time with Big Bottom Market. We use it all the time and it works. We just had an article run in the Bay Area Reporter today. And so I take advantage of my sexuality all the time and use it to help inform reporters that are writing about LGBTQ businesses about what we're doing. So yes, my answer is yes. There are definitely ways to stroke that fire.
Anything to add on that, Jason?
Yeah, I'll speak from the other side of it. When I'm pitched a business to invest in, or somebody is potentially wants to work together. You know, my business is a national, international business before I sold it. And when I have a person who is part of the community that wants a meeting, absolutely, I'm leaning in. 100% I'm leaning in. I will almost always take that meeting, to be honest. I have never bought a product because someone happened to be part of our community. I bought a product or invested in a company because I believed in what they were doing, and I believed in them, and I believed it was going to satiate the need I had. And so that's how I look at it. Being part of the community, absolutely. I believe in, once we have financial equity, all sorts of equity things can certainly help with it. That being said, you have to have a really great product or solution. Otherwise, all you are is part of the community, which is freaking awesome. But you got to have a great product also.
Yeah, perfect. And I think I know Brad's second question, because I can see it here. I'll jump in, seeing his connection's a bit glitchy. What's the best way to get PR from LGBTQ plus media sources? Michael, you touched on that. So what's your strategy around that?
You know, it's really identifying what your message is to that specific audience. I mean, you really have to think about the audience that you're selling to. And, you know, we are, I'll use the market again as an example. We are a gourmet market and gourmet deli and marketplace that's LGBTQ owned, that just happens to be in the Russian River Valley in Guerneville, California. So we have a message to communicate to people that are coming up here that happen to be gay, because this is such a gay friendly visitors destination. And I hope we open back up so that we can be super friendly with all of our customers and LGBTQ friends. But it's really important to think about the message you're communicating to your specific audience. It comes down to, again, messaging and who your audience is.
Awesome. All right, we had a bunch of questions come through, which I found sort of pretty interesting, and kind of cut across what we were discussing last week on the fundraising side. And it comes down to whether there should be a difference between the way you tell your story to investors versus customers. And is having a consistent brand story the right approach, or should you tailor your messaging to those specific audiences and treat them a different way? We've got a couple of follow-on questions. So we'll start off with that one. You know, if you think there should be a difference, what difference should that be? And if there shouldn't be a difference, why? Jason, we'll start with you.
I am so sorry. I was live responding back to someone. And I was, one more time, my friend.
Okay, so the question was, how do you tell your story to investors versus customers or potential consumers? Should, you know, is consistency key? You know, should there be a difference to that messaging? And if so, what would be your advice on that different messaging?
So again, I'll speak from both sides of the house of helping people with pitches and also being pitched. My recommendation is that there is no difference. Again, who are you? What is your product? And how does it pay off that consumer or the person that's going to buy it? What does it actually do for them? And if you can't communicate those three things, and again, all the great coaching that David brought up, then you will never get someone to invest and you'll never get someone to buy. If you come in with a bifurcated story, I'm actually thinking you're full of BS from the very beginning. Because I'm an investor, but there's only this many people. You're trying to sell your product to a lot of people. So tell your story, be honest, be authentic, and both your consumer and your potential investor are both going to get that. So that's from my own perspective.
Yeah, that's great advice. Michael, anything to add on that one?
So this was basically audience message development, and should it be different across all of your audiences?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it really depends. I mean,
right.
My first answer to that is yes, because, you know, each audience might be a little bit different. You should have base messaging that is consistent across everything, but you want to speak to, you'll likely want to speak to one customer, maybe a little bit differently than another customer. But a messaging platform, and I think, Jason, this is what you were saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, but messaging is going to inform many different
Oh, for sure.
elements.
You flex that messaging all over, but they're not two different stories.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, you know, your messaging, like you said, is going to inform your investor deck, or it's going to inform
Totally.
advertising or your press releases. So consistency is super important.
Yeah, that's great. There's a great book called Get to Aha by the Cunningham Collective, Andy Cunningham, who's an early marketer for Apple. And she goes into a lot of detail around really nailing that consistent messaging, getting to the core of your company's DNA before you embark on all these marketing and PR strategies, so that stays a consistent approach. You know, so no matter who you're talking to, whether it be pitching a job to an employee or a product to a customer or an investment to an investor, they're not confused about who you are as a company or who you are as a founder, and that can be really key. Some follow on from that is. If you're working on a very deep tech solution that not everyone understands, and particularly not all investors understand, do you have any tips around how to get some messaging across that is effective and that will resonate, even if people don't really understand what the product actually is or does, and how you can get that across in like a 3 or 5 minute pitch without getting into the weeds too much? It's a question that came up last week and again this week on sort of like deep tech solutions and how you can market that both to customers and to investors. I guess the customers should understand the need for it. Otherwise, you've kind of built something that people don't really understand. But it's particularly on the investor side. Any tips around that, or does it come back to the core principles of just value and showing that value to the customers and how you derive that value? I'll start with you, Jason.
I'll speak to it generally because every deep tech is a little slightly different, but generally speaking, my understanding is that deep tech takes a lot of investment and a lot of time before the product actually becomes real. And so you absolutely, again, have to talk about what the product is, what it does, what it benefits, but then you have to do the hook. You have to romance that story. So many great people in deep tech are scientists and engineers, and you are, no offense to those people, I love your people. I've got my Star Trek posters up here, part of the nerd herd. You are the worst at actually talking about the actual benefits, romancing those benefits to your end investor. You have to get them to see what the good is, the social goods, the societal good is, and how they can participate with that, and how they can fuel that. That is really critical, that they can see themselves being a part of it, because you're asking them to really come on for 3 to 5 years sometimes.
Yeah, Michael, anything to add to that one?
Yeah, I mean, I actually did a mentorship with a StartOut member, and I've been working with him for 2.5 years now. And he came to me with a solution that was so hard to understand, and he was so ready to go to investors. And my advice was, until my 21-year-old niece can understand this, I don't think you want to be telling anyone your story. If you've got something that people aren't going to get, then don't go out there and talk about it. Really make sure your messaging is simple and easy to understand. Is it direct? Does it clearly differentiate against the competition? All of those things that I talked about before are super important. If nobody can understand what you're doing, you're not going to get anyone interested in your product, and you're not going to get any investors in there either. So from the beginning, you need to make sure that you can clearly articulate what Jason was saying, your features and your benefits, and what exactly your product does.
Yeah, thanks for that, Michael. I think that's really, really good advice. I might ask one more question and then throw back to Brad for some more Q&A from the audience. So if you have any other last minute questions coming up, please add them to the Q&A box so Brad can see those. But Jason, Michael, a question came through that it sort of addresses paid media and advertising and social spend. Should I use paid media for my startup? What's the value added of working with an ad agency, and how should they think about calculating ROI for a marketing investment?
So before I would invest in any money, I would first make sure you're exhausting all the free media that's available to you, or that you could do that first. Before you spend any money, you need to actually, doesn't matter if you work with an outside agency or not, you need to have an understanding of what is your ROI, not necessarily specific ROI to I paid this, I got X out. What is the lifetime value of a customer for you? And that truly becomes your ROI. That's going to guide not only your internal conversations, but external conversations, and it's going to start determining even what type of marketing tactics you use. Is it beneficial to work with an agency as an old agency guy? No, not always. Not always. If you don't know how to do it yourself, then you absolutely want to have someone to help you. Because you will make a lot of mistakes, which is fine. If you are at a company that you have the resources to pay an outside agency, you want someone internal to have some sort of level of expertise in what you want that agency to do. Because if you don't, then you won't understand what that agency is doing and the services that they're providing and evaluating their recommendations and all sorts of the good stuff. So you want to be a good partner to that agency as you want that agency to be a good partner back. But the first thing I would do is make sure you fully exhaust all your free media that you have available and understand what your cost of actually acquiring a customer is.
Yeah, that's excellent advice. Michael, anything to add from your end on that?
I mean, agree with Jason 100%. And I would absolutely add in there that don't go out and hire an agency, whether it be an ad agency, PR agency, or social agency, until you feel like you're ready to hit the ground running. You can spin your wheels and waste a lot of money if your product isn't at least close to beta or in beta, if you're a tech company. And if you're a consumer products goods or you're a service offering, just make sure you're ready to fly out the door, because the longer you engage with an agency, the more money you're going to spend. And if you have VCs behind you, they are going to gawk, because you've got to look at your monthly burn rate and determine whether or not you even have the cash to spend on something like that. You know, that going, like, focusing on your free paid media elements is great. And really doing as much research as you can and doing as much on your own is probably the best way to move forward initially.
So one thing that, you know, doesn't matter the size of the company, small budget, massive budget. The first thing that typically gets done, gang, is you think about what is your business plan? How many units of something can you sell? And don't do the whole thing like, well, if I sold this much, I can hire this many people. Don't do that. Think about in the next 12 months, 18 months, this is realistically what I need to produce for me to be successful. I need to produce $10 million in sales. My profit margin on that is X. Great. Now, what marketing tactics does it take for me to engage X amount of consumers in my funnel that will eventually, because it takes 2 months before they buy, you have to do that Excel work. What will happen is that you'll end up getting this, and we can go offline later, gang, but you'll get this basically a number of how many people you need to reach, how often, the frequency level, and that goes into how much money you actually need to do for media or marketing. You're going to say, I don't have that budget, but I've got this budget, so I'm going to start here. But your strategy is already laid out. You know where you're going. And that's the most important piece. The money is not, where you're going is. Does that make sense? So it really is like a Saturday day when it's raining and it's just you and your tears doing a big Excel worksheet. But that's it. Yeah.
Let me jump in as well. A person named Todd Farrell said, what is free media that is available when you don't know what that is? From my perspective on the PR side, that's basically, you know, reaching out to reporters and getting them to write an article about you, just having a compelling reason to reach out to them. But let me explain a really great way to figure out who the reporters are that are writing about you. Identify your competition and do a competitive media analysis. Go to Google, type in the competition's name, click on news, and you'll see everyone that's been writing about that. Same thing for the marketplace that you're in. Search the marketplace, you'll see who's writing about it. And then also I do subject matter media analysis, where I take the subject matters that are related to the services or technology or whatever that my client offers, I pop that into Google and I research who's writing about those subject matters. Again, this is a great way to build what we call a media list. The other thing you can use is there are free PR release services online. Just search free PR release service on the Google. I use PR Web, and we really like that. So, you know, Todd, I hope that answered your question, but, you know, earned media is a great way to take advantage of the free media that Jason's talking about.
And
your
blogs are important. LinkedIn is important.
Yep.
It's also like all those are part of that free media. Getting that SEO to your site is critical. The other thing I will talk about is this. If you are a small company, you're one of one, one of five, you clearly have a crazy amount of passion for the product or service that you offer. The person that you have already sold to knows that. They know that you are deeply customer centric and you are excellent at what you do. One of the greatest things you can do is engage that customer, because you're probably more like partners now, and you let them know, if you enjoyed your experience with me, can you please tell others? And as a trusted partner of mine, and some people are comfortable with this and some people aren't, I am happy to give you a bounty if you if you help bring a piece of business in. And I've seen young startups actually do really well with that, because I know other marketers, right? We all know people in our own industry. So it is a great way of getting like-minded people to say, I had a great experience with this company, you should go check them out too. And now they're also invested into your company. And it's a nice way of just starting things out when you're really just trying to seed your first, several clients.
Okay. Thanks for that, Jason and Michael. Brad, in the few minutes we've got left, are there any final questions you want to raise?
Yeah, so I think Jason had been talking some with Todd, but there were some specific questions related to CRMs and recommendations, sort of for the entire flow, from collecting leads and prospects to estimates, sales, order, shipping, delivery, etc., completion, follow-up, all that jazz. So, maybe if the panelists could talk a little bit about CRMs and how that factors in, and if they have any recommendations as far as maybe some of the best products out there that they're opinion.
Any tools, Jens, on the CRM side that cover the full gamut of the business rather than segmenting them?
For most small companies, I think for the most part, a Mailchimp or Mailchimp-like seems to do well. If you are more sophisticated, then there are other services. But for most people, I imagine on this panel, that will be what you'll need. The biggest part of CRM is, no, it's not a one and done. A monthly newsletter isn't really it any longer, especially if you're trying to sell a consumer product. You want to make sure, as you're developing your CRM strategy, you look at different categories of people who've opened, didn't buy, people who opened and bought, people who haven't bought from you a while. So you are segmenting out your type of messaging.
Michael, anything to add on that one?
Not in my wheelhouse. Not even going to go there.
That's also a good answer. One I'll throw into the mix, plugging a good Aussie company, is oncord.com.
Oh, yeah, they're great.
Yeah, ONCORD.com. I popped it in the chat. Good to know you've heard of them, Jason. That's basically an all-in-one and really good for e-commerce and marketplaces.
They do well for smaller gangs, for smaller mid-sized companies. Do really well.
Totally. Brad, any final question?
I mean, not really. There was one about, you know, the expectations of, I think, roles in an early stage startup. Like, do customers expect to be have communications from the CEO? Do they expect to have CEOs pitch or explain the product, that kind of stuff? So, you know, you might talk a couple minutes about that.
100%. Yeah. I mean, there is nothing more sexy to somebody than a CEO who's hustling. People love it. Because most people aspire to be their own boss and to do the really scary thing about starting up your own company. And I have to say that people love it. It is not a step down or doesn't feel weird to someone else. They absolutely love it.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, and the one little secret that we have in the world of PR is that, you know, if you hire a firm and you have your firm working for you, a really great way if you're an early stage startup is to create a separate email address and have your firm manage that and send emails to reporters from the CEO, and they can manage the communication then. That way reporters feel like, you know, you've developed that messaging with the CEO already. Reporters feel like they're hearing from the CEO. And if you're the CEO and you just want to be sending the email to the reporters, go ahead and do that. I think that people would rather hear from the CEO, but you got to make sure that CEO has something good to say. So I'll circle all the way back to messaging and say, if you're not saying the right thing, then don't have the CEO go out and say it.
Yeah, if the CEO is not good in a meeting, do not go to that meeting. Like, it is not okay. Yeah, the CEO needs to be a great presenter and sharp and all those things.
Yeah, I just pick up on the comment from the person who submitted that question, because it's an interesting point around things that might be an impediment to that happening, like a disability. You know, one thing that you could also consider is using video and pre-recording those things. You know, the comment was made that it's super tiring having to talk with a stutter to all these people. So, you know, whatever that the impairment might be, if you set up some recordings and then send out that messaging so people can see that and then understand it, then that'll create some understanding.
That's right. Great.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you very much for your time, Jason and Michael. For the audience, if we didn't get to your questions today, again, please know that you can join StartOut and get this type of advice one-on-one from mentors and experts like Jason and Michael. Please do so and keep an eye out on the StartOut social channels for upcoming events. More like this while we're in COVID times, but plenty of in-person events when things open up again. So once again, thank you very much, Michael and Jason. Thanks for Brad and Seth for joining as well. And good evening, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.